But yeah, some of these things are good ideas, but if they don't end up in CMIP, sometimes they're maybe not, the value might not be there.
Are any utilities doing all their meter changes at midnight to try to alleviate this, and then just filling in those holes? That
So the answer is yes, some of them are. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a good idea. It's see, if you synchronized with MDMR that this was the time of your meter change, it makes it impossible to get a register read from here into MDMR. Eventually, you're going to need to put that register read on your bill. The whole Measurement Canada problem here is that utilities billing on time of use has stopped putting register reads on the bill. And it makes it impossible for a customer to then verify that their readings are accurate compared to what's on their meter. You've removed this concept of being able to walk up to the meter and verify the accuracy of your bill.
For sure, yeah.
So that's a Measurement Canada requirement, and if you synchronize this as your time, you'll be in violation of Measurement Canada.
Could it go to the ODS to say, estimate this time, put that, push that through it?
But if you've synchronized as the relationship end time being here, you'll never be able to submit meter data from this meter into the MDMR past here, right? So you wouldn't be able to get, like, you could get the interval data from this meter into the MDMR. The piece of this slide here is that in today's MDMR environment, there's no partial day framing. This is a bit of a problem when it comes to new services or meter removals. This is a meter removal. So, when you remove the meter at 11:15, there's a little bit of uncommunicated meter data, but there's also no meter data coming in for this premise until the remainder of the day. Meter's been removed, it's not communicating data. But if you want to bill this day, if you want to bill for this consumption here, you need to fill the rest of the day so that MDMR can frame it and provide back to you billed quantities. So you need to, in fact, submit valid zeros for this piece of the day. And herein lies the trick. How do you submit valid zeros for these intervals if your relationship ended at 11:15? You can't. So you need to, in a meter removal, synchronize this midnight as the end time for your meter so that you can submit valid zeros for this piece of the day.
Makes sense. Now that you say that.
It sort of makes sense in a sentence, but try and make that work in your business process. Right? Because you got guys out there writing down 11:15, you got people getting the paper, keying it in, synchronizing, and going, damn, I'm at midnight.
Unless you do it on a handheld, and nobody ever has a manual handheld.
Well, so this is, yeah. So we're seeing that with some workforce management systems that you can differentiate between service order types and have the system translate the times for removal.
Yeah, so it always flows in from the system. You can always know that that's what you had to do.
Yeah. Because you want the guy in the field to always be writing down the real time, because that's the time in the register read you need to put on a bill. So you need that time in reading. But for the sync relationship, for new services, meter removals, you need to adjust it.
Oh, the time it's logged,
So
the
then
time it's the time of
That's right.
So to do you said you have to push the sync with the valid zeros, and then afterwards the meter.
You have to take the sync relationship, move it to midnight, and then submit meter data that includes the valid zeros. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So then the register read is really on midnight, but it's effectively at 11:15 because.
So this will be different if you're Ulster or Census. You're going to.
Yeah, that's worse when you say it's different, because then I think, oh, that means two solutions. Right?
Yeah. See, getting back to the VE service code, part of the VE service code says, when I ask for bill quantities, if this is my bill period end date, my bill period start date, bill quantities are built on the interval data between here and here. And then part of that process to provide back bill quantities is what's called the billing validation subcheck. And so to do that, they grab the register read from the midnight of the start, register read from the midnight of the end. If there's not register reads there at midnight, the VE service code tells them how far away from midnight they can look for it. VE service code 3 says you can look for 1 hour on either side. So earlier we said census users usually use 3. So if this is the midnight of your bill period end date for meter removal, you need a register read there within 1 hour if you're a census user that uses VE service code 3. So you got to put one there for midnight, as well as one there at the time of the removal. If you're an Ulster user and you use 23, That VE service code lets you operate within 20 hours of midnight.
Wow.
So really, when it comes to meter changes, removals, new services, you probably don't need to put one there at midnight because 20 hours within midnight is going to bring you always within business hours, right? So if you just left it there, that would probably work in an Elster scenario. Now, this brings you to the ODS rules. What does the ODS rules? The ODS rules are going to put one there at midnight for you. I won't go into the details yet, but
Yeah.
we'll do that another time. A bit at a time.
Sure.
Okay, so the slide here tells you what the colors represent. This is meter data that's already been submitted to NDMR, and it's already obviously been collected by Census or Elster. This data here has probably been, this data here has been, the orange, has been collected by the AMI system, but not yet communicated. This is data that hasn't yet been communicated, so it's, unless you plug it into a board or something, it's lost. But we're going to estimate it there by putting the register read in the right place. And then this bar here represents the need to submit valid zeros. Okay, so this slide is just further illustrating that and putting numbers to it. Okay, so secondly I said that the ODS is going to put a register read here at midnight, but it's also going to put one here. The reason you need to put one here is because of this uncommunicated data. If you don't specify the time that this register read was taken, and ODS then sees this as the end time for it, that data, if it's 5 kilowatts, is going to get spread out across the day. You want the 5 kilowatts to get put here, in valid zeros the rest of the day, to accurately represent consumption, especially in a time of use environment, right? That might cause customer complaints, or inquiries at least, when they see it spread out across the day and there's price impacts for them. Starting to see like it's complicated, meter change.
Meter change is the worst one. Yeah.
Yeah, this is still the removal. The change is even worse.
Yeah.
So, so the yellow arrow there is telling you need to put the register read at the right time so consumption is accurately represented. This is talking about the VE service code. So if you're VE service code 3, you're going to need to put them in both places, a register read there. ODS will do this for you, meter sense. And then the synchronization time. 11:15 is the time of the removal, but to bill for this day, you need to synchronize the end time as midnight. It's because this is probably the hardest business process conversation we will have. Is how do you have a service person write down that time, but synchronize something else? This is takes hours to go through when we get to finally hammering through the nuts and bolts of it. It's really hard to make this happen. It's so hard, in fact, that we see utilities that are in production for a meter removal either not bill for this day or synchronize this as the time, making it impossible to bill for this day. So they go into the NDMR GUI, they take all these kilowatts and ram them into this interval and make this the end of the bill period. Because it's very difficult to do. And so that's not a good business process solution, right? Because somebody looking at that on a web tool is looking at the consumption of a big spike here and then nothing here on the day they moved out or whatever, right? Like whatever the scenario is for.
At least it's the benefit of the customers is all off peak, right?
Well, that's true.
So, but still.
And to some extent, this is maybe temporary, right? Because eventually, when NDMR gets to version 7.2, which comes with partial day framing, you'll be able to use this as your end day in time. You'll be able to bill on it. So maybe that's not a bad solution, temporary.
Because you're shoving it to. And how many meter changes are you doing really right now?
Well,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
just
a true
removal, so
this is a
it's
true
not-
meter removal, and that's a demo,
That's enough. Yeah.
right? That's not very often.
No.
Meter changes, if you get all your meters and kind of get through that infant mortality stage of out-of-the-box failures, you shouldn't have too many.
So you
Now, when you do get them, they're gonna be coming,
Fast and Furious.
fast
Hopefully
and
it'll be on
furious.
7.2.
You get a lot that goes bad or something, do a few hundred a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you got your-
That's right. See, it's
And right now, sure.
I just, I see like as a asset. If you have a workforce management tool, at least then you can have the right data and you can figure out a consistent approach to what do you do with it, right? You always
This becomes a.
You can see the tool being keyed as time, right?
not a business process is using much, right? Business process is type in exactly what you did, dock the thing, and then
And let it do
it'll do its thing.
based on the rules that you tell it to follow.
Yeah.
Because the timing should come out of the tool. Everything, like, you
Yeah,
don't have
yeah.
to put
So
the time.
typically, workforce management, when you hit the enter button to complete the order, that's the timestamp. And so that will be the timestamp, and we want that timestamp for meter change. But for meter removal, that will be the timestamp. But you need the system to then, as it imports as these completed service orders, to take that 11:15 time and translate it to midnight tonight.
But knowing this, going forward, this is one request we can have in the meter sense, because supposedly when they do a sync, you're supposed to be connected to the tower. So if I'm telling the meter that I'm gonna be doing a change now, why couldn't that meter be updating its data at that time?
But you can try, you can hit the meter with a handheld.
No, I'm trying to say this could be like a request we put in the census, because they should be
Oh,
able
sure.
to do this.
Sure, I mean.
You know what I mean? In its updates and stuff, like it should be to a point where eventually you should say, okay, I'm gonna do a change now. Oh yeah, I gotta key my data, and I should have, there should be no red.
Yeah.
Okay, there should be no red.
I think this is going to require a handheld tool from the AMI providers to kind of stand in front of the meter and go, okay, upload your data now.
Well, that's what they have now in the handhelds now. Like,
Well, the census handout today says, what's the signal strength here? Attempt to communicate now. But I don't think you ever get positive confirmation that it's actually communicated, right? It just,
the new tools that are out, not officially, but the little USB fobs,
Right.
they do. You can
Okay.
actually see how it's communicating and everything.
It'd be hard for it to say communicate your data, and then you'd have to know it was done, right? You need a way to know
Yeah.
it was done before I pull it off, or I say, yeah, tell your final read, and then yank it, and it's.
No, it's the same thing as like right now, the new tool, you're triggering it. I can trigger the tool to communicate in the mode to communicate it with. So you're actually
Right.
communicating to the meter. And
Yes.
you're telling, I want to go to 4 to 1 or,
Yeah.
MPass, whatever I want it to do. So I'm telling the computer the meter what to do. At the same time, if that communication is there between the handheld tool and that meter, there should be a point where I could say, trigger the data.
yeah.
And then tell me when you're done.
Well, and that sort of is there now where it says to, try to register with the tower, right? But it's only an attempt. It can only blast out its data. Whether the tower receives it is another story,
Exactly.
right? Because it's about 1 out of 4 transmissions that are successfully received by the tower. So some of it's there, some of it's not. Another kind of painful thing to think about is that this is a meter change that happened at 11:15. So what? There's 15 minutes of consumption there that we need to put somewhere. Is this going into the 11 till 12 interval or the 10 to 11 interval? And we haven't talked about meter data processing yet, but last in wins with MDMR. So if you submit meter data for up until, say, noon, for this meter transfer block, overwrite it if you submit another 11 till 12 interval. So you need to think, well, not you, ODS needs to think about how it's going to work this meter data. Not so important for meter removal. This can be the 11 till 12 interval if you want. But if there's a meter change, it also has some consumption in the 11 till 12 interval. You can't submit 2 intervals. So it needs to start thinking about how to construct these 2 intervals for the different meters. Something that anyway. Again, and we started talking about sync relationships. So in a meter removal, this is an end relationship. The register read needs to be 11:14 or earlier to be processed by MDMR. Okay, and there's a little blurb about the VE service code again. Meter removal. Questions on that? Asked a few along the way.
Just keep them in.
Just keep going.
Never ever.
That's right.
We're never gonna take a meter out.
Yeah, but there, see,
Yes,
solved.
many utilities come to the conclusion that people aren't even allowed to move anymore. They're just
Yeah.
Some of you are.
they're not going to move meters, they're going to move customers from home to home. That's actually easier than syncing this stuff.
That's probably the best.
You take your meter with you.
Yeah, take your meter when you go. Okay.
Yeah, put it in. Here's a carry case. Take it.
Yeah, right, the carry case bumper meter. Enjoy.
So for new meter install, the slide deck here comes with the same slides as in the other one to introduce start and end times. So let's just jump into the new meter picture. Looks very similar to the removed meter, just flipped over, right? So a lot of the same concepts here. We're going to need to frame 24 hours of data. So in this case, we're going to need to submit valid zeros at the start of the day. If we install our meter at 11:15, we need our relationship to start at midnight last night in order to make that possible. One of the things that comes along with a new meter that we haven't talked about yet is historical intervals. If this meter was installed on a test board, you might be installing it in the field and the register read is 0, but it might have some history in there that, as a result of testing. Might come with some intervals prior to that install time. Gets a little confusing to work with when you know that your meter was installed at 11:15, but there's a 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock interval. And where did this stuff come from? Well, that's where it comes from. It's either test boards, or if the meter's been reused, it's coming from the previous home. And these intervals are only saying, when Census, as an example, transmits meter data, it says, here's my register read now, and here's my last 11 hours of intervals. And those intervals may have come from a different house if this meter was previously used. So this is the reason for on a new install, we need to communicate this time of the install so that the ODS can throw away any of that bad data and make it valid zeros for all of the hours before that install time. Rest of the slides should be fairly similar to the meter removal slide deck. Meter removal, one of the things you don't encounter in meter removal is this problem with sync timing. You can remove a meter and then not sync the fact that you removed it for several days because that meter was previously synchronized with NDMR, so none of that meter data is being rejected. Right? For a new install though, NDMR didn't know about this meter. It doesn't know about it until you send the sync file to tell NDMR that it's been installed. So sync timing becomes important, timing of the submission, not the relationship with the start and end. Submission of the sync file becomes important here because NDMR is going to reject this meter data until you've synchronized it. So if this takes you 3 or 4 days to process the paperwork, that's 3 or 4 days of this meter data that's been rejected before you've synchronized it. Okay, so that's what this slide's talking about. There's a new relationship. So meter data won't be processed until it's been synchronized. Slide's talking about the partial day framing. So in today's environment, 24 hours of data that's framed, so you need those valid zeros there. Talking about the consumption again, we want 0 for the hours before the meter was installed, and the consumption to be accurately represented after that. So we need the register reads to get there at the right time in the event that ODS needs to perform any estimation. Again, with the VE service codes for billing validation subcheck, this is going to become the first day of the bill period for this premise. So if the VE service code is 3, we need the register read to be sitting within 1 hour of midnight. So we're going to put one there at midnight. But for Measurement Canada requirements, we need it to be there at the time the meter install as well. So ODS does these functions for you. That first interval. Oh, sorry, this one's still talking about the register reads. Where we're going to put the register reads at the midnights or at the that yellow arrow should actually be over here. It's a copy paste from my meter removal. But also we will talk about the first interval as well. This is at 11:15. So is this going to be communicated as occurring between 11 and 12, or 12 and 1, or 10 and 11?
Is there any validation from, let's say when the tech actually installs, if he has a written register read from the register itself?
Yeah, that's a register we want to submit to NDMR. So I'm not sure what you mean by validation though.
No, because isn't he also picking up a register?
Yes.
Right from the first interval too?
Yeah, that's why. So when he processes that service order, he's going to write down that register read, and that's the one we get to ODS for these validation reasons. So it can make sure that the interval data starts at the right place, and for the meter removal, so that all that estimated data gets estimated properly. So you asked a similar question a while ago, Pat, about the register read that maybe remember another little funny thing that can happen with MDMR. One of the reasons that we want to really concentrate on figuring out where these intervals sit is we don't want any missing intervals in. If in the meter removal, remember that little, so this is the install, but think about the meter removal for a second, that little red bar that was there of uncommunicated meter data. But at the start of that uncommunicated meter data, there's a top of our register read that the AMI system has. And if the register read that the AMI system has is, we'll say 123.09, and it was acquired 2 hours before the 2 hours before the service tech was out there and writes down the reading. The reading that the service tech's going to write down is 123. There's no decimal places on the displays of these smart meters. This is why we want no missing intervals in our meter transfer blocks. Because if 2 hours after this reading was taken, this reading is taken, this is a problem if there's intervals requiring estimation. Because this reading is lower than this one. This is a rollover. If there's a 1 hour missing, there's an hour where MDMR would estimate 10,000 kilowatts. Because just because of this lack of decimal places. So it becomes very critical to, in a meter change, to properly line up your meter transfer blocks so that there's no missing data and MDMR doesn't get an opportunity to estimate data there. Because this is a kind of a necessary byproduct of estimation, right? And automation. Like if you just look at the numbers, I mean that's what's happened. This is rolled over into this 2 hours later, or an hour later.
So for census, since it's grabbing the last 11 hours, can you just say we're not going to reinstall a meter for within 24 hours of being removed somewhere? And that way you avoid.
Well, that takes care of that history piece, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you remove a meter, you should not reinstall it in a smart meter world for days and days and
They're
days. Yeah,
They're
like,
not.
probably more like a
They
month.
shouldn't be anyways, because they've been doing that for a while now.
Yeah. Meter data for the old meter when it's removed. Then the new meter's installed, which might come with some history that needs to be thrown away. And then you've got meter B data that needs to be processed for the remainder of the day. So you can take all the concepts we talked about, kind of put them into one. We've got meter change. The reason I've provided this sort of boundary on a meter change is you need to get used to the idea of an SDP channel of data, particularly for meter change. Once meter data is submitted by a meter, it belongs to the SDP channel. So 2 weeks from here, you can go and query on meter B, get interval data for meter B, but then set your time period that you're looking for meter B data for, back to back here, you'll get data, even though it didn't come from that meter. Because data, once it's submitted, belongs to the SDP. So even though you're asking for data by meter, it shows you data for the SDP. And so that can get kind of confusing for a user, right? You gotta understand that this is data for the SDP, not the meter. E-meter kind of works like a CIS more than a meter data management system in that regard, right? The meter data's come in, it's processed, now belongs to the premise. No longer belongs to the meter. Most meter data management systems that we worked with in other markets kind of leave all the data attributed to the meter up until the time they bill, and then they kind of gather it all together. This one works a little bit different that way.
So both these transactions go under one file or two separate files?
The synchronization information would go in one file, it would go in one iSync file. The meter data for this piece here and this piece here would likely go in one file. This piece though, unless you synchronize same day for the meter change, all of this meter data would be rejected, and then you need to resubmit it. And so when you come along to resubmit data within one file, you would submit this chunk, this register read, and all the meter data that had been rejected. And you would do that in one CMET from ODS. And that, in a snapshot, is what you need to do with ODS. These are the register reads you need in there for your measurement Canada requirements, post on a bill. So those go in from the ODS, you'll estimate missing data so that you're filled for all consumption and bill for it in the right place. And then your meter B data is rejected. And that's how ODS makes life easier in meter change. Does all that for you. So again, start and end times though are important for meter change because this is a meter removal. So meter removal that happens at 11:15. We need to submit the register read at 11:14 or earlier. Beyond register read can go in at 11:15 or later. Have to think about the intervals here because you can't have overlapping intervals. Okay, what this slide is trying to show you is how much data might be, lost. If this is the day of your meter change, I mean, what is your typical business process to process paperwork? They're in the field, they're installing the new meter, they're writing this information down or keying it into a workforce management. Does that come back same day? Does it come back the next day? If it comes back the next day, is it processed that day or is it processed the next day? This synchronization process happening over here in a paper utility is about as good as it gets usually, right? Change happens this day, paper comes in the next, they key it in the next. And so if that's the case, you're synchronizing here. MDMR doesn't know about this until at least this midnight, which is before this 5 a.m. file, which this 5 a.m. file contains this meter data. That means that all of this data has been lost. And that's what we talk about in more detail in meter change business processes, time and how much data has been lost. Needs to be submitted. So you guys are paper today?
Yeah, for that stuff. Yeah.
With plans for workforce management in the near future or not so near future?
The future at some point.
Yeah.
It just depends on when or if we gotta make a case.
Getting in information.
Yeah, more efficient.
And there's
More
error,
efficient.
yeah, error.
So in MDMR, what I think the push for is data integrity, right? Like we talked earlier about future data meter changes. Well, if you're in workforce management, you never create that problem because provided they don't go out in the morning with the wrong date in their workforce management handout.
Oh, yeah,
But if they go out each morning with the right date in the handout, they don't create this problem. And then you never get rejected sync files for future dates. And if your CIS isn't real flexible about resubmitting sync data, I mean, unless it is flexible, that's a tough business process to resubmit sync files. So, if workforce management cleaned that up, I mean, maybe that's good enough reason right there. No more
Well, I think
key
if
punch
we're gonna
errors.
do it
Right?
now, if we're gonna scope it, now's the time to actually scope
Yeah.
it right. So we actually make sure all, like you said, make sure all the sync files come back right.
Yeah.
All the workforce management works in conjunction with.
Yeah, barcode scanning of new meters so that nobody's making key punch errors on which meter number went into which house. Swap the meters. I mean, if you said that this meter was installed here and this one installed here, but in fact they're like this, and you don't figure that out for 6 months or 2 years,
Oh my god.
I mean, what do you do now in the MDMR, right? You gotta submit the sync correction and then 2 years of meter data to fix it.
Yeah, it's not just like, I reversed it, no, fix it.
No, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, it's not
That's,
even-
if you want to do it right and get the meter data into the system of record, which is the MDMR, you have to resubmit all this
Or
meter
you move
data.
the customer. Tell them to go
They
to
have
the
to
next
move
door,
it.
it's done.
They physically
Tell them
have
to
to
change
move.
units.
So yes, the swap meter is actually the one where people are coming to the conclusion they're just going to take the two families and switch
That's
them.
all you should do,
That's
that
easy.
actually works
It's
better.
easier to pay them for all of it.
Mike, what about the ones that are going from under 50 to over 50 and over 50 to under 50?
But on and off time use, you mean? Or
Pretty
No,
much.
not RPP, yeah, you know what I mean, so
Yeah.
now you're an RPP, but all of a sudden, hey, you know, it's